Hello again. I'm here to say that we got a strike and we need your help to keep the channel going. Please subscribe and leave a like. The strike came from Cacao, which is the name of the publisher. Now enjoy the video. A wyvern flew freely through the skies, slicing through the clouds with elegance. This image became permanently etched in the mind of a young boy from the powerful magic house of Dekulin. On that day, he decided to abandon his life as a mere servant. The freedom shown by the wyvern in the air was the only reason he needed to change his destiny. Years later, that same boy, now a mage, stood with his hand extended, using his magic to choke another mage. The man, clearly at a disadvantage, tried to argue that the former servant had been hiding his true power all along. He claimed that what was being displayed now was not something a simple servant could do. However, the mage, cold and firm, ignored the words and kept control of the situation. He wanted answers, and he was the one asking the questions. The mage pointed to the book the man was holding and asked if it was a grimoire. The other man confirmed with difficulty and, even while under pressure, wanted to know if the mage had truly fought so many people just to capture someone like him. The answer was simple and direct. Caution was needed when dealing with members of the Dekulin family, and that was why he needed clear answers. He wanted to know how the man used the grimoire. The prisoner, his face already reddened by the magical pressure, admitted that he did not know. And in that moment, the mage realized it made sense. If the greedy members of the Dekulin family had known how to use the grimoire, they never would have left it stored away in some random warehouse. They would have been using every last page. But then a question emerged. If they did not know how to use the grimoire, why were they hunting that man? Perhaps because the item had immense value great enough to move even the most powerful members of the magic house. Desperate, the man begged the mage to hand over the grimoire, promising he would plead with the Dekulin family to spare his life. Otherwise, he warned, the mage would be hunted like an animal. The mage kept his serious gaze and asked if he really had that much power. And with that, he declared those would be the man's last words. The man tried to respond, but his throat, constricted by magical force, could not make a sound. Suddenly, the mage felt a new and intense presence approaching. It was someone with a powerful aura, impossible to ignore. A new man appeared, and, with a calm and authoritative tone, acknowledged that the mage had excellent instincts. He introduced himself as Frieren von Dekulin, the supreme leader of the Dekulin magical family, and said they could discuss the grimoire later, provided everyone there behaved. At that moment, the mage froze inside. He had served the Dekulin family for 10 years, half his life, but he had never seen the chief with his own eyes. This was the first time. The Dekulin house was the most powerful among the magical families of the eastern continent, and now he was finally face to face with its leader. In silence, he reflected on the impression he had of that imposing man and concluded bitterly that he was someone completely unpleasant. Frieren reacted with confusion. He did not understand what the mage meant by that. The mage then accused him of trying to steal the fruits of another's labor, of attempting to take credit for magical achievements that had been earned through effort. He found it shameful that someone as powerful as Frieren would stoop to such a level. Amid the tension, both of them laughed. It was a strange and uncomfortable laugh that echoed through that hostile place. But deep down, the mage who had once been just a servant was completely terrified. The mage stared forward intently and could not stop thinking that this was something truly serious. The very head of the Dekulin family had come after him in person. The presence of that man was anything but ordinary. He radiated power. He was, without a doubt, the strongest mage the former servant had ever seen up close. Frieren von Dekulin, without hesitation, stated that it would be much easier to kill him and forcibly take the grimoire. However, he went straight to the point and proposed something unexpected. He said that if the mage handed over the grimoire and agreed to return to the service of the Dekulin family, he would forget everything that had happened and let him live. He regretted never having noticed the talent of that former servant before. He called him a mere vagabond from the black and white district, someone who had learned cheap tricks practiced only by servants. Yet even with that rudimentary knowledge, he had reached an impressive level of magic. Frieren acknowledged there was talent there and affirmed that with the support of the Dekulin house, the mage could go much further. The mage sincerely considered the proposal. Returning to Dekulin seemed, for a brief moment, like a real possibility. Then he answered, saying that it was fine, but he would have one final condition. He would consider the offer only if he could become the leader of the family. He asked what Frieren thought of that. It was a direct provocation. Frieren's expression changed immediately. He was visibly irritated by what he had just heard. The mage then asked if he had not watched the battle. Without hesitation, he broke the neck of the prisoner still in his grasp, then asked if the leader of the family had any idea how many had already died in that same way. Frieren stepped closer, slowly, and asked if he truly intended to act like that. He warned that if he continued down that path, he would end up dead. The mage admitted to himself that it was true. He was risking everything. He then moved toward Frieren, convinced that the only way to truly measure strength was by comparing it to something else. He protected himself from the direct attack and did not back down. The family leader declared that he would put him in his place. He cast a spell and summoned a massive stone stake that shot directly toward the mage. The mage barely dodged it, but he noticed that he could not find any opening in Frieren's defense. defense. Frieren von de Keulen told him that he was thinking too much. He cast another spell and slammed a stone wall against him, completely trapping him. He said that if the mage wanted to compare powers, that was fine. He was willing to show the true scale of the difference between them. An explosive spell followed, hitting the mage directly, as the wall had left him with no escape route. Even so, Frieren confessed he had not used his full power. If he had, the mage would already be dead. He had spared him on purpose, and now wanted to know how that felt. Still standing, the mage asked what would happen if he accepted the proposal right then. Frieren asked if he was being serious, but in the meantime, the mage was already preparing a new spell, this time a powerful lightning bolt. He said he might accept it, but he was tired. Tired of eating dog food, tired of being treated like trash. Then, he fired his lightning with enough force to almost destroy the stone wall. Frieren looked at the attack and replied that it was all nonsense. He struck his staff on the ground and summoned a magic circle so vast that it could be seen on the horizon. He finally revealed his true power. A colossal lightning bolt tore across the sky. The mage, stunned, remembered once again the day he had looked up and seen the wyvern flying freely, but now he also remembered the real reason he had looked to the sky back then. After the attack, Frieren approached. He admired the fact that the mage was still alive. He said the mage was impressive and asked if he now understood the difference between their powers. The weakened mage asked if, after all that, Frieren still wanted him to return as a mere servant. Frieren, with a serious expression, replied that he had never said that during the battle. He did not want him to return as just a servant. He wanted him to become the leader of a vassal house of the de Keulen family. The mage was silent for a moment. He thought about how that man, the head of the de Keulen house, the most powerful in the eastern continent, with enough influence to rival the empire itself, was offering him command of a vassal house. He then picked up the grimoire and said, with a restrained smile, that it was indeed a good offer. Frieren added that the mage still underestimated his own worth. He said he wanted not just the mage, but also the grimoire. When the mage finally held out the book, Frieren declared that with that act, all his flaws would be erased. From now on, he would have the honor of standing with de Keulen. But at that moment, the mage simply burned the grimoire before everyone's eyes. Then, with sarcasm, he asked if Frieren no longer wanted the book just because it was a little scorched. Frieren, eyes narrowing in anger, stated that he would not have a peaceful death because of that. And the mage, unfazed, responded firmly. He told him to shut up and listen first. Originally, Astor had been just a servant, someone who solved problems quietly and did not care much about money. But everything changed the day he found that grimoire. His reason for taking it was not ambition, but justice. He got involved in the case of an old colleague, also a servant, who had been devoured by the young master of the de Keulen family. It was a crime covered up with forbidden magic, and everyone pretended nothing had happened. Frieren von de Keulen, the head of the family, accused Astor of having used that kind of magic. Astor confirmed it without hesitation. He said the real culprit had been the young master, and that the family had merely hidden what had truly happened. Frieren then asked if all of that was for revenge, but Astor answered with honesty. He knew that his life, like the lives of the other servants, meant nothing in the eyes of that family. Even so, all he ever wanted was to help those who could not defend themselves. He knew that to do that, he would need a lot of money. That was why he had decided to retire for good. He no longer wanted to live in the little doghouse the de Keulen family offered their servants. The family leader declared that he had heard enough final words. He then summoned the blue flame, the greatest pride of the de Keulen bloodline, a flame that never extinguished and was said to make anyone regret to the bone. But Astor, standing before the fire, thought that regret was an empty word. Considering the miserable life he had lived, dying did not seem so bad, and when the flames engulfed his body, he felt something unexpected: freedom. At the very moment he should have been burned to ashes, the fire stopped. Not only that, but time itself froze around him. The grimoire he had burned with his own hands reformed before his eyes. Then the magic of the book lodged itself directly in his chest. He had no idea what was happening. In the blink of an eye, he was no longer on the battlefield, but in a dark alley. Confused, Astor wondered if he had not been dying just moments ago. Everything felt strange yet familiar. He looked around and recognized the place. He was back in the black and white zone, also known as the gray zone. That was where he had lived before becoming a mercenary. It was where he had begged to survive. And when he saw his reflection in the dirty water running like sewage, he saw his own face, but younger. It was definitely him, but he had become younger. The only thing that remained from his old body was the mark of the grimoire engraved on his chest, and he began to wonder if that book was really that powerful. Could it actually make someone go back in time? Even though it was a rare and precious item, Astor did not know much about it. In the end, he thought that maybe this second chance was something good. He was almost certain it was not a dream, after all. The stench of the gray zone's sewage was still exactly the same. In that moment, he he realized he could now give it his all. He had the chance to do everything differently and maybe make it work this time. But what did make it work really mean? He remembered an old dream, the dream he and his friend once shared. That memory was what had motivated him to finally abandon the life of a servant. In that forgotten past, he and his friend used to talk about their miserable childhood. They were both born as beggars in the gray zone. They had nothing. No clothes, no food, and certainly no education. And his friend once asked which of the three was the worst to be without. Astor replied that it was hunger, but the other disagreed. He said that if it were only hunger, they would still be alive and fighting. The real reason their lives had taken such a cruel path was the lack of education. If they had studied, maybe they would not have been enslaved by arrogant nobles. That friend, during that conversation, revealed his greatest wish. When they finally retired from that life, he wanted to build a library, a place where anyone could enter, no matter if they had money, power, or noble blood. Everyone would be able to read, learn, and study freely. And now in the present, Astor, with all those memories pulsing in his heart, decided to aim even higher. He did not want to build just a library. He wanted to build a tower of magic. There was no practical reason for it. He just liked grand things. The location did not matter. What truly mattered was what he would place inside it. All kinds of books from every kind. And right at the entrance, on the very first floor, he would place the secret manual of the Decalon family. He wanted even beggars to have a copy. The same knowledge the Decalon family had hoarded for generations would now be there, within reach of everyone. Just imagining it made his mouth water. But now he had another problem: how to get his hands on that manual again. That was a problem for the future. For now, Astor needed to deal with the present. Right then, Astor took a direct kick to the face. A boy with an aggressive look asked if he was trying to hide. He wanted to know where the money was, calling him a miserable beggar. Astor thought the situation was bad, but after surviving countless battles in the past, that would not be the thing to break him. Angry, he grabbed the boy's foot and tried to fight back, but his punch was weak and poorly aimed. He missed completely. Confused, he wondered why his hand was not moving properly. Right after that, he was punched again and kicked once more. The pain was intense, not just in his body, but also in his heart. The humiliation was what hurt the most. By a twist of fate, the boy slipped on a stone and fell straight into the sewer. Taking the opportunity, Astor stood up and ran. But even as he escaped, he swore to himself that he would remember the face of that kid. He did not consider it a retreat, but rather a strategic withdrawal. After all, he was a veteran mercenary. And mercenaries do not know the meaning of giving up. Later, lying in a dark alley, Astor examined his wrist. It was dislocated, probably because of the poorly aimed punch from earlier. He felt pathetic. He admitted to himself that his body was too weak. That reality was hard to accept. So he decided that his plans for the Tower of Magic would have to wait. Before anything else, he needed to fix his own body. While he thought about this, a little boy approached. He asked if Astor was hungry. Astor was confused and asked if they knew each other. But as he looked more closely, he realized he had no idea who that boy was. He was filthy from head to toe, but despite being worn out, his clothes looked expensive. Maybe he was a noble child caught up in some kind of power struggle. He looked like a ticking time bomb about to go off, and that put Astor on alert. The boy introduced himself as Damien and said his mother's name was Bianca. Still suspicious, Astor asked if he had hit his head somewhere. Damien, however, claimed he did not have a mother. Astor replied that he also had neither a mother nor a father, so technically he was winning. He thought it would be best to get away from that kid as soon as possible. It all smelled like trouble. He decided to send him away before something worse happened. Even so, Damien stood right beside him and said he would go with him. When Astor told him to leave, the boy simply pointed to his injured hand and asked if it hurt. He said he could heal it. Then, with a simple gesture, he used a healing spell. Astor froze in surprise. That was not ordinary magic. It was the light of healing, a secret and legendary technique from the ancient Blandor family, a powerful bloodline that had fallen into ruin due to the Deculan family. Astor's mercenary instincts immediately flared. This was no coincidence. He was definitely getting involved in something rotten and extremely dangerous. But the question that would not leave his mind was, why was a child of the Blandor family in the gray zone? At that time, the Blandor should still have been at the height of their power. He called the boy again, and, as he looked him in the eye, finally noticed the details of his face. His eyes were of different colors. In that instant, Astor remembered who he was. That was Damien von Blandor, the legendary monster of mismatched eyes. A being who, in the future, would be known as the Immortal Butcher. A monster that did not die even when decapitated or torn apart. And now, right in front of him, he was just an innocent, smiling child like any other. It was hard to imagine he would become that abomination. Astor remembered the mission he received before going back in time. As a mercenary, he had been sent to Blandor territory under direct orders from the Deculan family. He and his companions knew the Blandor were powerful and capable of defending themselves. Even so, they were sent there. One of the mercenaries mentioned having heard that a monster was invading the region, a being that healed itself constantly and had probably already killed many. At the time, Astor thought it was some kind of orc or goblin. But when he arrived, he saw it with his own eyes. It was not some random creature. It was a human, a boy using unique magic with infinite healing, tearing people apart while laughing like a maniac. It was Damien, the same one who was now standing in front of him. But at that moment, he was still just a hungry, kind child. Damien said he wanted to eat. He was very hungry. He said his mother always told him that to grow up strong, he needed to eat well. Aster asked if he happened to have any money. To his surprise, Damien pulled out a pouch filled with gold coins. Aster looked at it, smiled, and said that from that moment on, they were friends. He called Damien his new best buddy and declared that it was time to eat. Later, in a simple inn, Aster enjoyed the moment with a full stomach and a clean body after a good bath. While he rested, Damien looked around with curiosity and said he did not know there could be a house above the place where people ate. He said he used to sleep in the street and that this was his first time in a place like that. He also revealed that he had no father, which made Aster think that it was not a competition of tragedies. Even so, he asked Damien if he had a mother. The boy just answered with a vague question, asking if she was supposed to be there, and soon made it clear that he thought maybe she did not even exist. Aster realized he still did not fully understand the boy's situation, so he asked how long he had been alone. Damien responded in a confusing way, saying he had run away from his family and had slept more than 10 times. So that would mean 10 days? But he corrected himself, saying he slept more than twice a day, which would lower the actual number, maybe 5 days, or maybe 3 or 4. It was hard to know, and Aster concluded that the boy was kind of an idiot after all. Still, Damien mentioned that he hadn't slept well in a long time, since the ground was too hard. Out of patience for more confusion, Aster buried his head in the pillow and thought that Damien really said nonsense, like a lunatic. Even so, as long as they were together in that gray zone, he could look after the boy like some kind of babysitter. Deep down, Aster thought it wouldn't be so bad to form some kind of bond with Damien. Having someone nearby might help in the future confrontation against the Decalin. And besides, noble families usually had many spells recorded in books, which could be useful for him to build his own power base. Of course, before anything else, Aster needed to deal with his own problems. He had to find that kid who fell into the sewer, uncover the meaning behind the 7 marks on his chest, and focus on what truly mattered. And now, with everything calm, he decided to do exactly that. Damien wasn't getting in the way. On the contrary, he even showed curiosity by asking if he was going to practice magical breathing. Aster replied yes, and Damien said he would try the same later. As he focused, Aster remembered his past life. Back then, he had built his magical foundation using simple spells, taught only to mercenaries. But the limits of that were all too clear. That was why he started stealing spells from nobles, nearly dying many times. Still, it was thanks to that he learned valuable techniques, like the knight's body hardening, spirit summoning, alchemy, and other rare skills. Before dying in that life, he had come into contact with a power absurdly superior. In front of it, he felt like a flea compared to the immense power of Frieren. That was why, now that he had a new chance, he wanted to surpass that limit. This time, he would learn something greater. He would pursue the foundation used by the Decalin themselves, the celestial origin technique. This was a required art among them, capable of unlocking the use of all mana attributes. He had once memorized this technique during research, and now he would finally put it into practice. However, as he began the exercise, the symbol marked on his chest started to burn. It was as if fire were running through his veins. He understood that this was a result of impurities accumulated within his body. Then he remembered a high-level spell used by nobles. This spell forced mana through the body and burned the impurities in the magical circuit. To endure it, he cast a mana bath on himself, completely immersing in pure energy and concentrated magic. When he woke up, he wasn't sure how much time had passed. Beside him, Damien was sleeping soundly in his bed, but Aster knew he had succeeded. There were no more impurities in his magical circuit. His mana was purified. Even so, facing the Decalin would still be a major challenge. At least now his chances had increased. He had once been a mercenary, someone used to surviving even in the worst situations, someone who never gave up. Now he was even more prepared, and the next morning, Damien appeared with his hair dyed light brown. Aster noticed he had hidden his most striking features and changed out of his noble clothes. If he was really being hunted, this would help keep him safe. Damien looked at him excitedly and asked what they would do now. For the first time, Aster might have been genuinely happy not to be alone anymore. He replied with determination that it was time to stir up some trouble, and then the two headed straight for the back alleys, where the street kids and little pickpockets gathered. When they arrived, the oldest among them looked at Aster with surprise and sarcastically asked where he had been. He wanted to know if Aster had taken a bath in the sewer because of his strange appearance. When they got to the alleys, the oldest of the boys looked at Aster with contempt, noticing he was accompanied by someone who looked like he came from a rich family. However, Aster didn't give time for mockery and landed a punch straight into the boy's stomach. Still remembering the last time he had been harassed by him, he warned that this was only the first of 123 punches as payback. The commotion caught the attention of the other street kids, who immediately charged at Aster and Damien, but Aster already knew all of them. Even surrounded, he was ready for a good fight, and that's what happened. In the middle of the scuffle, Damien, excited as if it were a game, asked if it had already started. After a few minutes, Aster was completely dominating the fight. He delivered punches in all directions, hitting heads, legs, and stomachs with precision and strength. Damien, watching closely, noticed that Aster was using mana in his fists. He channeled magical energy into his punches, making each blow even more powerful. Impressed, the boy followed everything with fascination, feeling like he was learning just by watching. And when Aster knocked down another boy near Damien, the latter stepped in and used his healing magic on the injured one. Aster thanked him, satisfied, since the healed boy could now take a few more hits. The fight went on until sunset. Aster, already shirtless, treated it as training. He used the blows to strengthen his body, practically whipping the opponents who could still stand. Kindly, he asked Damien to heal another one, even though the boy was already terrified. That kid had been healed so many times he no longer knew if he was being helped or punished. To him, Aster and Damien seemed like real demons, and every time someone was healed, it was just to be beaten again. By the end of the day, with all the boys defeated and exhausted, Aster thanked each of them. They stood in a line, obedient, looking like little soldiers in formation. Aster said he was proud of them and thought to himself how satisfying it had been to punch each of them in the head over 100,000 times. When one of them asked if they could leave, saying they had already taken enough hits, Aster agreed, but the boy commented innocently that the alley was actually his home. Aster thought he was asking for too much, so in the end, they all ended up sleeping on the streets. Before they could fully leave, Aster felt something strange. A different presence was approaching. It was silent, fast, and carried a malicious energy in the air. Everything suggested it was an enemy, maybe even the one who had been chasing Damien. Aster quickly realized that his current body was not fit to manipulate magic efficiently. But that did not matter much. In his life as a mercenary, he had survived without relying on magic. Now he would do the same. He gathered all the mana he had left, channeling it to his fingertips, preparing a single, concentrated, powerful shot. He knew he would only have one chance. But, surprisingly, when the mysterious figure drew near, it simply kneeled before Damien and looked relieved. He called the boy young master with emotion. Damien, confused, recognized the man and called him Alfredo. The man confirmed his identity, saying he had been searching for the boy for a long time, asking where he had been and what he was doing. He also said he would not let go of him until he returned to the family. Aster, watching the scene, had a disgusted expression. Meanwhile, Alfredo apologized and properly introduced himself as the butler of the Blandor family. He said that young Master Damien seemed happy with Aster and, for that reason, suggested that they both return together to the Blandor territory. Aster paused for a moment. He knew that prestigious families like that one rejected anything considered impure or dishonorable. He did not know Alfredo's intentions well, but that did not matter. He already had in mind the goal of creating a connection with the Blandor family. Conveniently, the Blandor territory was on the way to the capital, where the Xenion Academy was located, considered the best in the East. It also had the most renowned library in the region, perfect for someone who wanted to build a magic tower. That was essential for Aster's growth. For that reason, he accepted Alfredo's invitation and decided to go with him. Although he knew he was straying a bit from the original plan, Aster understood that this would be important for his future. He even wondered if the food there would be good. And after some time traveling by carriage, they finally arrived at Blandor territory. It was the first time Aster officially set foot there. The mansion was imposing, with beautiful gardens and servants everywhere, taking care of every detail efficiently. Alfredo then handed the responsibility to Lancy, an elegant and firm woman who approached with respect. With a formal smile, she asked young Master Damien to enter the house. And after a few discreet pats to hurry him along, the boy finally stepped into the mansion, marking the beginning of a new chapter. Later, Alfredo went to the lady of the house's quarters to personally inform her that the young master had finally returned. He explained that although he had been found in the gray zone, he was now safe, back in Blandor territory. Upon hearing that, the woman became furious. Her expression twisted in anger, and with explosive energy, she loudly questioned how he had ended up in the 7th gray zone. She wanted to know if Damien was truly all right, and warned that if even a single hair was missing from her son's head, there would be no forgiveness. Alfredo kept a calm posture and asked the madam to listen to everything he had to report before drawing any conclusions. When she heard the full story, her expression changed. Although anger was still present, she admitted feeling relieved. For her, knowing that her son was safe was what truly mattered. Alfredo silently thanked the heavens that everything had gone well, because he knew that facing the fury of a woman known as the Blood Witch was not something easy to endure. Even so, she acknowledged the butler's effort and said he had done an excellent job that day. Alfredo humbly replied that he was only doing his duty, but he mentioned there was something that deserved special attention. He explained that the boy named Aster, Damien's friend, had noticed his presence even while he was using advanced concealment techniques. What was most surprising was that the boy had been prepared to respond with a concentrated magical attack. According to Alfredo, such perception and readiness were not common. It was evident that Aster possessed special abilities. The madam agreed, saying it was remarkable to see a child with that level of talent living in the gray zone. With that in mind, Alfredo decided to take action. The next morning, he sought out Aster and made a direct request. He wanted him to become his successor as the chief butler of the Blandor family. He thought that was a great opportunity for the boy and expected to see him surprised by the proposal. But Aster naturally said he would not accept. That caught Alfredo off guard, making him wonder if he had heard correctly. Even Damien looked confused by the refusal. Aster, however, was straightforward. He thanked him for the offer and said he was truly honored by the consideration, but he preferred to continue as he was. It was not out of disrespect, just a personal choice. Alfredo remained silent for a moment. He thought about the boy's past. Aster had been born in the gray zone and had learned magic by himself, relying only on natural talent. It was admirable. And he, Alfredo, had also come from a common family. He knew what it was like to grow up not knowing where one's own limits lay. He told Aster that the world was vast and that, at that moment, he might feel too confident, thinking he could achieve everything. But Aster replied that he did not have such ambition. He did not want to rule the world, nor saw himself as invincible. That irritated Alfredo. He held himself back from losing control and asked if Aster at least knew the story of the Goblin of the Canyon. It was a creature that lived only in its small territory, believing it was the strongest, the richest, and the most feared, until it realized the world was much larger. But Aster replied lightly, saying he identified more with a wyvern, which only increased Alfredo's frustration, and he eventually lost his patience. He said that Aster knew nothing, that he was ignorant, and promised to personally show him how terrifying and grand the world truly was. He took the boy to a training area where other adolescents of the Blandor house were practicing. They were all around Aster's age and had been recognized as young talents. Aster observed attentively and acknowledged that the Blandor house took training very seriously. The adolescents had refined mana and well-developed auras, though their eyes slightly resembled those of goblins, filled with pride and disdain. Alfredo watched his reaction, and Aster admitted that he could feel something in the atmosphere. Still, he made it clear that he would not accept the offer of becoming a successor, because he hated the light in a symbolic sense, something related to noble life and rigid obligations. At that moment, one of the trainees raised his hand. It was Winster, who asked permission to speak to Alfredo. He claimed that Aster had only refused the offer because he had not yet felt the weight of true power. He said he wanted to show a little of his magic, not as an official duel, but simply as a demonstration, so that the boy could understand what he was dealing with. Alfredo recognized the arrogance in Winster's words, but found the idea acceptable. A light confrontation could be enlightening. He asked Aster what he thought about it, a friendly match, without resentment. Aster, however, knew exactly what that meant. To all those boys there, he was just a lucky beggar who had appeared out of nowhere, an intruder in their territory. And now, he was about to be challenged. Everyone was probably thinking the same thing. At that moment, Alfredo allowed Aster to choose who he wanted to fight. Without hesitation, the boy pointed to 5 names. It would be a 5-against-1 fight. He seemed overly confident and even provoked his opponents, as if asking whether they were afraid of dying. His attitude surprised many, including Alfredo himself, who became nervous but ended up laughing. To him, that was the true spirit of combat. However, he made a condition. He said Aster would have only 1 minute. If he managed to endure 60 seconds against 5 mages at once, he would win a prize. If he failed, he would have to take responsibility for insulting their families. Aster, on the other hand, believed that Old Man was trying to trap him as a successor, but he still accepted the proposal. Later, everyone was already gathered, ready to watch the match. One of the instructors warned Alfredo that it was dangerous, but he replied that the boy's stubbornness needed to be broken, and this was the only way he would learn. The instructor then realized Alfredo had made up his mind, and if anything happened to the young master's guest, his own career as an instructor would be at risk. Meanwhile, Damien watched everything with excitement. Even after being warned that his friend was in danger, he only reacted with surprise and an excited smile. The instructor, seeing there was no way out, became tense. Lancey, another person present said that if the instructor got involved in that fight, Madame Gamo would be furious. Alfredo, however, ordered the match to begin, and one of the instructors confirmed it, even knowing that orders are orders, whether he liked it or not. Alence turned to Damien, asking him not to interfere and to promise he would return soon. But Damien, with a mischievous smile, already showed he would not follow that advice. One of the instructors explained that the duel would take place in turns, but Alfredo disagreed, saying they should all fight at the same time. The instructor accepted and explained that the fight would continue until one side surrendered. However, he reserved the right to interrupt the duel if the situation became dangerous. Meanwhile, Winster, one of the opponents, was furious with Aster, calling him a damned beggar. He promised to make the boy pay and prove that he was nothing. But as soon as the duel began, in a single second, a spell cast by Aster flew past the instructor and hit Winster directly. The blow was so strong that he nearly collapsed, and the other 4 mages were already unconscious, out of the fight in just an instant. Aster remained calm and declared that now everyone would understand who they were dealing with. Winster, still dizzy, noticed that the boy had several magic missiles ready in the palms of his hands. Even so, he judged them to be basic techniques, since those missiles consumed a lot of mana and were not very practical in real combat. However, Aster showed he should not be underestimated. He fired a magical missile directly at the head of each opponent, still moving, and explained that the world was cruel and merciless. Next, Winster took a punch straight to the face and fell, defeated. Aster announced that those would be his teachings. One of the boys shouted that it did not even look like magic, but Aster replied that it was indeed a form of body magic. The kick that followed, charged with mana, was so powerful that it broke Winster's teeth, while everyone around watched in horror as 5 teenagers were literally beaten and trampled by him. Alfredo, upon seeing the result, began to reflect. It really seemed like a compressed magic missile. Judging by the intensity of the spell, it might have been compressed 4 or 5 times. He came to the conclusion that if he had been hit by that during his first encounter with Aster, he would have faced serious trouble. He also could not understand how that boy was so good at fighting. Where did this ability to beat others come from? At that moment, Damien stepped in to help. Using his healing magic, he tried to restore the wounded, once again showing his kind and gentle nature. But the situation became even more serious when Madame Gamo, head of the house, appeared. The instructor immediately thanked Lentz, who had helped calm her down. Madame Gamo then approached, observing the chaotic scene, and firmly asked what exactly had happened there. Alfredo tried to justify himself by saying he was conducting a test, but she retorted that it was not a test. It was a massacre. Seeing the condition of the injured youths, she called out Damien, who was still trying to heal them. She ordered everyone to leave immediately. Damien was to return to his room, and Aster as well. Then she addressed instructor Rafit, informing him that he was fired. Later, Madame Gamo met with Alfredo. She was clearly disappointed. She said she did not know what his true intentions were, but made it clear he had crossed the line. Alfredo apologized, acknowledging his lack of restraint and saying he would accept any punishment. But Madame Gamo continued questioning how he could allow Aster to fight alone against several novices. She also wanted to know if Damien had helped the boy in any way. Alfredo explained that there was no secret plan. The truth was that Aster was simply very skilled. He talked about the magic missile he had used during the duel. It was the same one he had mentioned earlier. According to him, he had compressed that spell 4 or 5 times, significantly increasing its power. Madame Gamo remarked that this meant the boy had excellent mana control. She had not witnessed the duel herself, but she imagined it must have been impressive. After all, he had defeated 5 rookies alone using just a single magic missile. Alfredo also shared that Aster had rejected the offer to become his successor. That made Madame Gamo realize she needed to reevaluate her view of the boy. She ordered that he be brought to her. Later, when he arrived, she was accompanied by little Damien, who seemed cheerful as he offered cookies to the guest. Before anything else, Madame Gamo gave him the prize that Alfredo had promised if he won the challenge. Aster quickly noticed that it was a high-grade pill, something reserved only for the top 5 recruits of the Blandor house. That made him suspicious. In the world he came from, good deeds usually amounted to giving food to poor kids like him. Receiving such a valuable gift made it clear there had to be something behind it. But Madame Gamo assured him he could accept it without worry. Besides having won the duel fairly, he had also helped Damien during the incident in the Grey Zone. This was also a way to apologize for what had happened earlier. Still suspicious, Aster asked if he had to join the Blandor to use the pill. Madame Gamo said no. He insisted, asking if she was sure there was no poison. Again, she said no. He even asked if there was any hidden reason behind the gift, but she kept denying it. Only then did he accept the gift and thank her. Changing the subject, Madame Gamo said she had another proposal for him. Aster already had an idea of what she wanted. He assumed she was trying to secure him a spot at the academy, just like Damien. She then explained that Damien was actually supposed to have enrolled the previous year, but he had refused so firmly that they postponed his admission to this year. The problem was, he still kept running away from the idea. Madame Gamo said that Damien liked Aster a lot, and then the boy cheerfully said that if his friend went, he would go too. Aster understood the weight of the proposal. For the family, it was a big issue for the heir of the house to refuse to attend the academy. At the same time, it represented a great opportunity for him. The academy was one of the most respected places in the world, and in this world, connections were everything. Earning academic backing was highly valuable, but still, it felt like they were trying to put a collar around his neck. That was why he replied that he would think about it. Madame Gamo then brought up another subject. She said it might not be directly related, but she wanted to know why he had refused Alfredo's proposal. At that moment, Aster discreetly looked toward the door and noticed that Alfredo was standing behind it, listening to everything. With a mocking tone, he said that he cared a lot about his knees. Madame Gamo did not understand what he meant, but Alfredo, hearing that, was visibly shocked. Later, Aster was in his room again, focusing as he used the high-level item he had received. The magical breathing technique he practiced significantly increased his mana. His physical body still needed improvement, but he was impressed by the smoothness of the process. Normally, when someone absorbed that much spiritual power, they suffered from internal stone formation or impurity buildup. However, he did not feel any side effects. As he continued training, his thoughts returned to the academy proposal. There were many benefits to accepting. He could even find a patron there. Still, no matter how much he reflected on it, everything felt like a well-constructed trap. So, he decided to go out for a walk to clear his head. But the moment he left his room, he had the clear impression that someone was waiting for him. In front of him stood a silver-haired boy. At first, Aster thought he might be from a collateral bloodline, since the only direct descendant he knew was Damien. When the boy asked if he was Aster, he replied no, but the other insisted. He said he had dark hair and annoying look, and that the description matched perfectly. Aster, with his usual mocking tone, asked how anyone could think his annoying expression was sweet, and then tried to make the cutest face he could. The boy took a closer look and, to his surprise, commented that his expression actually looked gentle. He apologized for the misunderstanding, but Aster responded with a well-delivered middle finger. At that moment, Alfredo showed up and ruined everything. Everyone apologized again, respectfully addressing him as Mr. Aster. Alfredo then remarked that kneeling would not be necessary if Aster became his successor, and asked him to reconsider. That was when Aster realized his whole plan to escape that conversation had just been destroyed. The silver-haired boy, who had still been trying to provoke Aster, fell completely silent when Alfredo gave him a simple look. His presence alone was enough to end any jokes. Aster said he would deal with that situation later. He was determined to correct the attitude of the boy who had provoked him. When Alfredo asked if something was wrong, he replied that it was nothing serious. He only made it clear that when the time came, he would meet that boy again. Then he asked the head butler if he could meet with Madame Gamo, and later he was welcomed into her office. Madame Gamo was direct in asking if he had made his decision. Aster confirmed that he would join the academy alongside Damien. She thanked him for the quick response and said they would take all the necessary steps right away. She also told him to make himself at home. When Alfredo showed up to hear the news and found out Aster was truly going to the academy, he was thrilled. He declared that this was the right spirit, the passion, the fire in the eyes he had been waiting for. He said the first semester could be covered by them, but the next one would be more difficult, especially for a boy coming from the gray zone. Getting enrollment for the second semester would require a lot of effort. Even so, Alfredo said he would help him. He would be his angel, his personal sponsor. Alfredo, with pride, called himself the guardian of that future student. Madame Gamo commented that he was being very loud, and Alfredo, a little embarrassed, apologized and said he would head to the kitchen since it was almost lunchtime. Observing that unusual joy, Madame Gamo began to understand why Alfredo was so excited. After having his succession proposal rejected so many times, he was finally seeing a new chance emerge. Even so, she thought the academy plan was flawed from the beginning. She suspected that Alfredo might be getting fooled, just like the former head butler had been. Deep down, she felt a bit sorry for him. Later, Aster went to the Mage Tower where, according to earlier information, one of the academy leaders was waiting for him. As soon as he arrived, he was greeted by a hooded man who led him to a room where another man awaited. The hooded man warned him to be careful as he passed through the door. Aster entered a dark, dusty office with papers scattered all over the floor. There, he met Wenji von Blandor, a man much older than he had imagined. He also discovered that this was the brother of the boy who had provoked him earlier. During his life as a mercenary infiltrating various academies, Aster had learned an amusing truth about scholarly mages, often referred to by veterans as penholsters. They usually had messy hair and, from pulling their own strands while studying, ended up bald. According to him, the first stage was denial, when the mage still wore a hood to hide hair loss. In the second stage, they would accept their baldness, even if reluctantly. In the third stage, they shaved their heads completely. In the final stage, they would try to invent impossible spells to regrow their hair. So far, no one had succeeded, but surprisingly, Wenji was different. First, Wenji apologized, saying that his younger brother brother had likely made a mistake and unfairly spoken ill of him. He stated with certainty that the young master's guest would never behave disrespectfully. Aster then asked if he worked at the Magic Academy. Wenji confirmed, explaining that he was currently the vice-rector of the institution. This surprised Aster, as someone so young holding such a high position within the academy meant he had to be extremely talented. After all, the Blandor family would never place someone from a collateral bloodline in that role without a good reason. Wenji then commented that Aster was different from the other young men he knew, especially compared to the rebellious nobles from traditional families. This left Aster even more confused. The man in front of him was not bald, did not have dark circles under his eyes, and was even smiling. He seemed to completely break the stereotype of a mage that Aster had formed. During the conversation, Wenji also congratulated Aster for being accepted into Xenion Academy, explaining that he himself had graduated from there, specifically from class 145. But he soon apologized for going on for too long and decided to get straight to the main point. He asked if Aster would risk his own life for a friend. He said that this was something that directly affected the reputation of the Blandor family, and if the answer was yes, then he could entrust him with something valuable. It was then that, in front of Aster, the secret book of healing light appeared. Meanwhile, Madame Gamo was calmly tending her garden. She was thinking about how Damien's sudden decision to go to the academy had resolved so many problems that once seemed impossible to handle. She considered Aster to be a great friend. She recognized that he had talent, a polite personality, and although Alfredo sometimes said he was a bit shameless, to her that was normal for someone their age. But what pleased Madame Gamo the most was the fact that Aster, even after finding out who Damien really was, had not changed his attitude. He remained himself without trying to please too much or pulling away. In her mind, that made him someone different, someone who truly deserved to be by her son's side. Still, she also understood that Aster was the type of person who did not belong anywhere or to anyone. He was like a bird out of its cage, naturally free. But even knowing that, she knew she had to keep that boy close. That was why she decided that the Book of Healing Light should be offered to him. The moment the book was presented, Aster immediately thought it was a trap. However, Wenji's eyes seemed too clear and transparent for someone who was hiding something. Even so, Aster realized he would never fully understand that man. Wenji's eyes were like those of a perfect assassin, completely emotionless. They looked like the eyes of someone wearing a mask so well built that not even he could see his true self anymore. Wenji then spoke seriously, saying that this was not a joke. He also warned that the answer could not be given carelessly. Still, Aster remained calm. He thought there was no reason to feel uncomfortable there. Deep down, he believed they were in the same boat. He said that if there was something Wenji wanted to know, he could ask. If it was possible to do, he would do it. If not, then he would not. It was that simple. Wenji, however, said that just hearing what he had to say would already put Aster's life at risk. If he refused, he might need to be killed. Aster, without hesitation, responded with contempt. He thought that you only have one life anyway, and this was already his second. Let him try, if he wanted. The provocation was so direct that Wenji lost his patience and released his mana. The magical pressure was so intense that objects around them started levitating from the power. However, Aster stood firm, showing no fear. This satisfied Wenji. He realized the boy had passed the test. In truth, he only wanted to see if Aster could speak the truth without hesitation. He needed someone he could trust. He said he had high expectations for him because he believed Aster was different. Everyone born in the gray zone had similar lives, almost always destined for failure, but Aster was an exception. Wenji wondered why the leader of such a highly reputed family would place someone from the gray zone at his own son's side. This situation deeply intrigued him. Fortunately, he noticed something different and decided to investigate further. Aster, curious, asked if the fight with the younger brother had really been the reason for this approach. Wenji explained that it was a good excuse. The guest and his younger brother had fought, and that created the perfect opening. So he, the older brother, could bring the two together to talk. But Aster was still wondering what that man truly wanted. He thought Wenji was avoiding the main topic too much and not saying what mattered. Finally, Wenji admitted that he understood it was a difficult situation to bring up, but assured him that he was not going through any inner conflict. Still, his demeanor remained enigmatic. Actually, the Blandor family was more united than ever. The problem now was something else. Wenji explained that the real threat came from the Decalin family, as they were monitoring their every move, and when Aster asked why, Wenji said he himself had already declared that he wouldn't mind dying as long as he could share the truth. That's why he decided to reveal what was going on. Wenji had been secretly researching the celestial origin magic, a forbidden art connected to the Decalin family. He had discovered something important, perhaps even a secret technique, but upon hearing this, Aster was alarmed. He knew that just investigating this kind of magic was already enough reason to be killed. So he asked why Wenji hadn't simply tried to destroy it. Wenji admitted that it was true, and that if it were discovered that even he, the vice principal of the academy, was involved, he would be executed. At first, his goal really was to destroy the magic, but something changed. He asked if Aster could understand. The celestial origin magic was considered the root of all the Dekulin family's secret arts. It was so perfect that the deeper he studied it, the more he wanted to improve it rather than destroy it. He became fascinated by the technique's structure. Even knowing the danger, Aster thought Wenji was completely insane, but the timeline started to make sense. In his past life, when the Dekulin family destroyed the Blandor family, they had found exactly the results of that research. That was why Frieren gathered all his forces to attack the Blandor. From the beginning, he had seen the possibility of a new celestial origin magic emerging. So Aster asked why Wenji was specifically looking for him. Wenji explained that he hadn't shared anything with his own family because he believed there was a spy among them, possibly connected to the material supply route. As soon as he realized the danger he was in, he decided to share part of the research with someone he trusted. He also admitted he didn't want to die for nothing. Aster suggested it might be better to ally with the Decumanin, since they would probably welcome Wenji. But Wenji refused the idea. He had his reasons for not accepting that path. Instead, he asked Aster for a favor. He said the research was a collaborative work, but he had reached a dead end on his part. That's why he wanted Aster to deliver part of the research to Professor Parun from Zenionel Academy. As a reward, he would give him the healing light magic, and once the task was completed, he would also deliver a new celestial origin spell. Aster, suspicious, asked why the exchange couldn't be done right there. He thought he could take the healing light magic as a guarantee, since he'd be taking a risk. And if everything went well, he would get the other magic too. Wenji laughed, saying Aster was pretty shameless, but ended up agreeing. Ruan, who had been listening, pointed out that since Aster hadn't mastered celestial origin magic yet, it wouldn't be useful to him right now. Even so, he accepted the agreement, but set a condition. When the thesis was completed, they might need Aster's help and wanted him to stay as a partner until the end. Aster thought that was fair. After all, if it was just about the thesis, he was willing to help, but he quickly joked that he didn't know how to read since he was a beggar. Wenji froze for a second before realizing it was a joke, and Aster still asked if that Professor Parun could really be trusted. Wenji explained that he had known Parun since their student days at the academy. They used to compete for first place all the time, until Wenji returned to Blandor and the rivalry ended. To Aster, this meant there was another lunatic like Wenji in the academy. Great. Later, Aster began organizing everything he had to deliver. There were many books, notes, and a letter, but that letter was addressed to Aster himself. In it, Wenji explained that he had selected and separated all the essential magical texts for Aster's future. He had also indicated the exact order in which he should study each subject. That was the moment Aster realized it had all been prepared for him. It was an enormous gift. Wenji, despite being crazy, was a true genius. He had laid out a complete learning plan from basic magic to advanced techniques. And in addition to the healing light magic and celestial origin magic, Aster discovered that he would have around 132 different subjects to study. There was also the issue of the grimoire, something Aster knew he'd have to discuss directly with Damien. Now that he had the privilege of calling him a friend, he valued Wenji's books even more. Those were not ordinary books. They were true study guides, perfectly organized. Anyone who wanted to learn magic could build a solid foundation using that material. With that in mind, Aster began to rethink the purpose of the tower he wanted to build in the future. Now it would have a new identity. It would be a place dedicated to knowledge, where those who sought wisdom would find support. A space where books like Wenji's would have their true purpose recognized. Meanwhile, Wenji reflected on how Aster had been an unexpected gain. At first, he thought that if Aster turned out to be useful, he would involve him in the task. If he turned out to be useless, he would discard him without hesitation. But the boy had proven to be much more interesting than expected. Wenji still remembered the look Aster gave when threatened with death. It had been intense and funny at the same time. Aster was different from the others. He hid many things, like everyone does, but there was something special. His eyes were looking in the same direction as Wenji's. After some time, Aster was ready to leave. Lancey walked him to the carriage, which was already waiting. She informed him that both he and Damien wouldn't need to take the entrance exam for the academy. Still, she was proud of them both. They were now officially students of Zenion Academy. She also mentioned that the uniform looked great on him. Aster was surprised by the privilege. No exam? So that was what it meant to belong to a noble family? He realized he was feeling different, maybe even important. Damien, already dressed in the uniform, called his friend happily. The madame in turn wished them well. It was a great opportunity, and she hoped they would achieve the results they had been aiming for. Aster thanked her, but deep inside, his mind was already focused on the future. He was thinking big. After all, they were heading to Zenion, the greatest academy in the West, a place full of sponsors and opportunities. He needed to make the most of them. As they approached the academy, Aster couldn't help but think about how Wenji was truly a genius mage. The foundations of magic Wenji had gathered seemed simple at first glance, but the interpretations changed everything. It was like comparing magic to water. For some, it was rain that brought life. For others, a destructive flood. It all depended on perspective. Each noble house had developed its own view of magic based on those interpretations. And that's when Aster finally noticed the alterations Wenji had made to the celestial origin magic. But he didn't have time to think deeply about it. Damien interrupted him, calling his attention. They had arrived at Xanian Academy. Unfortunately, Lancey couldn't go any further with them. The carriage would stop there, and it was time to say goodbye. She wished them good luck, and Damien, excited, gave an overly dramatic wave. Then he pulled his friend along in a hurry. Damien mentioned that Lancey had warned them that if they arrived too late, there might not be any seats left. Aster found it curious. This wasn't a play where the early birds got the best seats, but deep down, he understood that the real purpose was to keep Damien from wandering off and getting lost. So he let it go. Shortly after, inside the main auditorium, Damien was completely excited. He said Lancey was right, because if they had taken any longer, there would be no place to sit. It was packed. Aster looked around, analyzing everything carefully. They were in class M3, seats 11 and 12. Damien seemed a bit anxious, and kept insisting they sit quickly. Aster found it interesting to see how excited Damien was, especially considering that in the beginning he said he didn't want to come to the academy at all. But then, something unexpected happened. Someone bumped into Damien and knocked him over. It seemed intentional, and the one responsible was a much older man. Aster quickly stepped in to help his friend up. Damien, however, didn't seem bothered. He just asked the man to be more careful next time, but the man wouldn't let it go. He angrily asked what had fallen on his clothes. That's when Aster noticed it. Damien had drooled on the man's outfit. Calmly, Damien said he would clean it without a problem. He licked his finger and rubbed it on the stain to clean it. The gesture made the man furious. In the next moment, he tried to attack Damien, but Aster was faster. He grabbed the man's fist firmly and warned him that it would be better to stop right there. The atmosphere turned tense. The man demanded to know who Aster thought he was. But before the argument could escalate, Damien answered simply. He said Aster was his friend, and Aster, with a small smile, confirmed it. That was right. He was Damien's friend. The man looked at Aster and said he was a great friend. After all, few people would be willing to take a punch for someone like that. However, he warned that Aster had chosen the wrong moment to show such loyalty. Aster already knew it would be hard to get along with others on the very first day, so he did not care much. If it had to be settled with punches, fine. But one thing bothered him. Was that guy also a student? Why did he look like a 40-year-old man? Soon, a small crowd started to gather around them. Everyone was watching as if it were the main attraction of the day, a fight between freshmen. But suddenly, someone showed up, looking shocked at the scene. He was not there to give a lecture, but to organize the mess. He told the newbies to clear the area and form a circle, calling them idiots while doing it. Then a magic barrier was cast around the two, turning the situation into an improvised arena. Bets started almost immediately. The big guy introduced himself as Exter from the Dolenpay house, revealing his noble background. Aster, who had no noble lineage, simply replied that he did not care. Exter also said it did not matter to him either, and since he knew a mage would be at a disadvantage in a small space, he let Aster attack first. That made Aster think the guy was kind of funny. After all, the one who had been silent before now would not shut up and even asked if Aster was scared. That provocation was enough to make Exter charge, but Aster dodged easily. Then he warned that he was not just an ordinary mage. He channeled magic into his fist and landed a powerful punch on Exter, who immediately wondered how that kid's strike could be so strong. Was he really a mage? Meanwhile, Damien was already by his side using healing magic. It looked like a kind gesture, but in truth, it was just to buy more time and let Aster keep hitting non-stop. Each punch landed on Exter with so much force that he could barely defend himself. It was like the two were taking turns, one hitting and the other healing. They looked like complete psychopaths torturing yet another victim in front of the crowd, and Exter, completely terrified, was losing control of the situation. Meanwhile, the audience was cheering wildly, making the scene even more chaotic. Exter, out of his mind, shouted in rage, unable to accept that a mage dared to fight like that. He tried to counter with a well-placed strike, and Aster acknowledged that the move was actually decent. But then Exter decided to use a stronger technique and finally hit Aster in the chest. The hit was strong, but Aster stayed on his feet, admitting he had been hit. Even so, he did not seem hurt, which left Exter in shock. He could not understand how that mage could endure it like that. Damien continued to heal Aster, which forced him to end the fight once and for all. So he decided to use a technique he had developed with his former companions in his past life, a technique involving the collision of magical particles, made to extract energy through mana. It was neither a magical art nor a martial art. It was pure application of technique and science. Then he executed his special collision strike. The glow glow of the technique was so intense and powerful that the magical barrier around them shattered. In the next instant, Exter was lying on the ground, defeated. Aster then ordered everyone to applaud and celebrate. The crowd went wild and Damien declared that they had won. Aster agreed, and one of the mages who had been watching since the beginning muttered something about how vulgar it was for a mage to fight like that. But he did not even have time to say more because one of the teachers appeared, furious, asking who the hell had started a fight on the very first day. Aster figured he was probably in trouble, but since he was just a mercenary, he planned to leave quietly. Except Damien suddenly raised his hand and confessed it was them who started the mess. Aster, in disbelief, could only think that kid was a complete disaster. Meanwhile, Exter was still nearly unconscious on the ground. Later, already in the professor's office, they were told that since they confessed voluntarily, they would not be punished, but they would be closely watched from now on. Luckily, they got back in time. The entrance ceremony had not started yet, but Aster had barely stepped inside and people were already talking about him, the mage who fought like a martial artist. Damien said they were becoming famous, and Aster, feeling uncomfortable, realized he was practically turning into a celebrity. They soon found their seats, and long after that, the headmaster was still giving his lengthy speech. Damien had already fallen asleep, while Aster noticed how impressive the headmaster was for being able to speak for so long without even sitting down. Not only was Damien sleeping, but he was also drooling in his sleep. Then, at a certain point, a staff member appeared with an urgent message for the headmaster. He apologized to the students and informed them that something important had come up. The headmaster said he would end his speech early, but the ceremony would continue as planned. The next teacher who appeared did not waste any time. She slammed the table and shouted so loudly that it even woke up Damien, which was impressive on its own. She introduced herself as Jaira and said she would take charge of the remainder of the ceremony. The first part would be dedicated to the freshman's oath, starting with the representative of the magic division, Dahlia of Denai. As she walked up to the stage, many students whispered about her fame as if she were a celebrity. She was the third daughter of the head of the powerful Nai family, considered a rising star and a prodigy in the field of magic. Watching from a distance, Aster thought that if the Deacon family was the most powerful in the East, then the Nai family was in second place. Dahlia had grown up carrying the weight of always being second best and was preparing to lead the next generation of her house. Even back when Aster was already close to retirement, she had never needed his help. In truth, they never got along. Some would say they were terrible friends, but in reality, it was just a long-standing rivalry. After her, Jaira called the representative of the martial arts division, a student named Paul. Since no last name was mentioned, Aster assumed he was not from a noble family. Once the oath was completed, it was time to introduce the teachers of class 172. And just as Dahlia was stepping down from the stage, she glanced directly at Aster. For some reason, that distracted her so much that she tripped on the step and fell flat on her face. The teachers introduced themselves one by one, some giving long speeches, others being more brief. But Aster was waiting attentively for only one of them. Finally, the professor he wanted to approach appeared, Frieren, responsible for the classes on magical principles of magology. At first, Aster thought he might resemble Wenji, but he was completely different. Still, he believed Frieren was also wearing a mask, just like Wenji used to. When Jaira announced the end of the ceremony, everyone was instructed to head to their dormitories. Damien, as usual, had fallen asleep again, leaning against a wall. When he was woken up, he asked if everything was already over. Aster said yes and joked that since he got caught sleeping, they both had been kicked out of the hall and had to return to the dormitory. Damien, startled, did not even know how to react. Later, already in the dorm, Aster thought he did not expect Damien to scream so much over something so small. It had just been an innocent joke. Thanks to his good relationship with Damien, who had important connections, Aster managed to get a room on one of the higher floors of the dormitory. It was a spacious and refined room with all the materials he would need: notebooks, pens, utensils, and a solid structure. However, his roommate would not be Damien, but rather Paul, the same martial arts representative. When they met, Paul got straight to the point. He said he preferred they did not get involved in each other's business, and that Aster could do whatever he wanted, like staying up late, as long as he did not disturb him. The two stared at each other as if they were about to fight. Aster did not respond immediately. He was curious to see how skilled that guy really was. He took a step forward, as if he were about to attack, and at that very moment, Paul reached for his sword, showing he was ready. Aster recognized that he was not bad at all. Before things could escalate, Damien appeared and called his friend to go out. Aster, unconcerned, said he was going for a walk and, in return, did not want to hear complaints if he made noise after midnight. Later, Damien asked who Aster's new roommate was, but he honestly replied that he had no idea. He said he was too busy to pay attention to that. Damien, excited, suggested walking around the academy. Len, who was with them, commented that there were many interesting things to see there. Aster agreed. He knew Xenion Academy was huge, and for that reason, it was important to get familiar with the surroundings. Despite the walk, something was bothering Aster. It had nothing to do with his past life, but his senses were on high alert. He felt that something was wrong. When he looked at the academy rooftops, he noticed the presence of mercenaries working under the Diculan family, hidden and watching. Still, the group continued their tour. They spent the day exploring the place, and Damien was impressed by absolutely everything he saw. One of the most memorable stops was a large artificial lake in the center of Xenion Academy. Aster thought Damien looked more like a babysitter than a student. He suspected that Lancey had thrown that responsibility on him on purpose, but he also knew Damien had a peculiar temperament, so he promised himself that one day he would make Lancey pay for that. In the end, he suggested that Damien ask to have a similar lake built at home, since he liked it so much. Damien, still excited about the lake they had visited, said he would build one even deeper than that. Aster, with his usual humor, replied that it was simple, just dig a hole and pour water into it. Somewhere far away, Lancey sneezed without knowing why. When they came across a large magical statue, Aster commented that it would be easy to make one of those too, and even suggested building a dragon statue with large wings. Dia liked the idea and said she wanted one too. Lancey, on the other hand, could not understand why he was getting so many chills that day. Feeling the walk had gone on long enough, Aster said it was time to return to the dormitory. On the way back, he identified 7 mercenaries scattered around the area. And if he counted the ones he could not see, there were probably at least 10. By analyzing their formation, Aster concluded that the target must be the second magic hall, where Professor Perun's laboratory was located. It was clear that either he or the professor himself was being targeted by the Diculan family. It was only a matter of time before they made a clearer move. Even so, Aster felt strangely excited about it. He was even wondering why they had not come after him yet. But the moment that thought crossed his mind, the assassins began to act. That night, while one of the intruders was sneaking into the second magic hall, another was already inside waiting. Suddenly, one of them received an urgent message from headquarters. A red alert had been issued, ordering all members to regroup at the nest of the primary target. That meant they had discovered something important. One of the hooded men commented that it was probably a sign that Wenji had begun to move. The new order was clear. Among the various secondary targets, Professor Perun was now the priority for surveillance. Still, a question came up. If high-level professors were there, could they really invade and fight them all? With only regular soldiers, it would be impossible. Someone pointed out that the so-called single digits would not be involved in that mission. None of them would show up. Instead, the fire demon Callahan would participate in the mission. He was known as Callahan, vice captain of the Diculan magical squad, nicknamed the Red Jewel. One of the hooded men, though relieved to know Callahan would be present, felt chills. That man was cruel, capable of doing anything to complete a mission, even sacrificing allies. Everyone there knew they were just pawns. If the mission failed, they would be discarded without hesitation. That is why they agreed that the operation could not turn into an open conflict. If a noble family mage were exposed, it would be a political disaster. While the enemies gathered in secret, Aster was already watching them from afar, hidden on the rooftop of the second magic hall. He knew the mission would begin at midnight, and that Callahan would be present. He was not just an ordinary mage. His name had been etched into history as a war mage. Aster knew he had to defeat him. The arcane fire magic of the Diculan, known as Scalaran magic, was Callahan's specialty, and Aster could not ignore that. He did not quite understand why the mercenaries had shown up so quickly, but in the midst of it all, he made an unexpected discovery. Even so, one doubt remained in his mind. Wenji's thesis was in his hands. So why were the mercenaries saying it would be delivered to a secondary target like Professor Perun? If the thesis he held was genuine, then the one being delivered must be a fake. That meant the real goal of the enemies was not just the thesis, but something beyond it. With that in mind, Aster decided to stay alert. That same night, still in the dormitory, Paul was getting ready. When he looked to the side, he thought Aster was asleep. Taking advantage of the moment, he left quietly. But he was mistaken. The Aster lying on the bed was not real. It was only a disguised dummy. The real Aster was already on the move. Paul went to Professor Perrin's laboratory, where Perun was already aware of the Diculan mercenaries' movements. They had invaded his territory with confidence, but that did not intimidate him. When Paul arrived, Perun commented that he still needed to improve his ether refinement. That was the foundation for mastering stealth and concealment arts, something essential. Then Paul handed Perun Wenji's thesis, completing the first stage of his mission. Perun thought Wenji had tried to deliver the thesis discreetly, avoiding the eyes of the Deacon family, but had still been captured. However, something did not make sense. He knew the cunning fox well and understood that Wenji would not be caught so easily. There had to be a trick behind it. At that moment, a great explosion occurred inside Perun's office. Right after, later, a man stepped in through the smoke with a cynical smile. He said it was a pleasure to meet him. His name was Callahan, and he asked if this was the professor who liked to lock himself inside his laboratory. While Paul panicked at the sudden attack, Perun remained completely calm. Callahan, noticing the young man's reaction, remarked that the mercenary seemed to recognize him, but he wanted to know if the professor did as well. Perun, impatient, replied that he had never heard of him and asked him to get to the point, since the stench he carried was ruining his nose and his office. Callahan found that amusing and said very well, he would get straight to it. The boy would die, and the professor could be dismembered along with him. Then he cast a flaming spell with full force. The attack, however, was blocked by an ice spell cast by Frieren. It was fire against ice, and the clash between the two elements lit up the laboratory. Frieren then turned to Paul and said that from that moment on, he would no longer treat him as a student, but as a mercenary. He had to fight to protect his own life. Then he noticed something serious. No alarm had gone off in the academy. That meant the Decalin were using concealment magic. At that instant, the only person he could rely on was the novice mercenary in front of him. Callahan, mocking, commented that the envelope really looked like it had come from Blandor's trash, and if they were not willing to hand over the thesis peacefully, then they could at least have some fun. He then unleashed another fiery spell, creating a series of explosions and bursts of ice. While Paul struggled to defend himself, Perun counterattacked with increasingly powerful ice spells. The impact of the magic was so strong that the entire office turned into burning ruins. From above, Aster was watching everything and realized the situation was becoming serious. He put on his mask. At that moment, he was no longer just Aster, but the single-digit mercenary, #1. He asked for the moon's blessing to guide his steps, hoping to be a good mercenary once more. Although, to be honest, he was not sure he had ever truly been good at it. Meanwhile, Callahan praised Paul's performance, saying he was not doing badly. But Paul was completely desperate. He was only still alive because the artifact Perun had given him was a protective talisman. In the middle of the battle, Perun appeared, telling Paul to move aside, and unleashed a powerful ice ray that managed to block another of Callahan's attacks. He then praised Paul's effort, saying he was doing well, and advised him to trust himself more. He enchanted Paul's sword with ether power and asked if he could keep blocking the strikes. Paul answered that he could, that he would endure as long as necessary. Callahan observed and commented that they made a fine pair. The mage and the warrior were cooperating well. In response, he kept launching increasingly destructive fireballs. Perun noticed that Paul was too busy defending against Callahan's spells, but he still had to deal with the other Decalin mercenaries approaching from behind. If the fight continued at that pace, the outcome would be bad for both of them. So Perun decided to play his final card. When the problem lies in spells and mana consumption, a battle for magical territory control begins. And he was curious to see how long Callahan would last. He changed his approach, abandoning elemental spells and starting to use pure magic. Callahan, seeing this, understood that the professor wanted a contest of raw power. He accepted the challenge with a smile. The two began to clash with pure magical energy against each other, creating an explosion so intense that even Paul, who had stepped back, was hit by the shockwave. At that moment, he realized clearly that the two fighters in front of him were true monsters. There was no room for him to act, no openings to counterattack. He simply could no longer keep up with the pace of the battle. Outside, a gigantic storm had formed. It was practically a magical cyclone swallowing the entire academy from the inside out. The other mercenaries from the Decalon family, who were trying to invade the place, quickly realized that entering would be suicide. The magical energy being released was terrifying, and while they were still counting how many soldiers they had left, they were surprised by one of them, a hooded figure who had already been waiting. And of course, the one who had gotten past all the mercenaries and approached Callahan with ease was Aster. He appeared suddenly, confident, as if he were just having fun, and made sure to announce his arrival in theatrical fashion, showcasing his entrance like a stage performance. Callahan, surprised and irritated, could not tell if the boy was taking things seriously, but had no time to think. Aster grabbed him by the neck and declared that this place would be his grave. With no alternative, Callahan retaliated with a point-blank magical explosion in an attempt to escape. The impact was strong, but it had a severe side effect. The sudden shift of mana inside his own body caused him to cough up blood. In that state, Callahan could no longer channel magical energy for a few seconds, leaving him completely vulnerable. And Aster, of course, would give no chance for recovery. Other mercenaries from the Decalin family soon appeared to help, trying to protect him. Meanwhile, Callahan managed to use a potion to stabilize his mana flow, but was shocked to see the power of that masked man. Alone, Aster was taking down all the other mercenaries mercenaries mid-air with terrifying efficiency. His movements were precise, calculated, without any waste. It was surgical combat execution. Callahan, watching all of it, decided he could no longer hold back. He summoned all the firepower he had left and declared that, even without knowing who that man was, he had to die there. The next flame blast was so powerful that it burned even the Decalan allies, all to hit Aster with full force. The explosion was so violent that it created a crater, and Callahan, seeing it, believed the masked man was finally dead. He did not care about the sacrificed mercenaries. The most important thing was completing his mission. While taking another booster potion, he tried to regain his composure, telling himself that losing control did not suit him. That was when a voice interrupted, asking if that was all he had. Callahan, on the outside, might seem like a lunatic, but on the inside he was cold, calculating, as cunning as a serpent. From the beginning, he had planned to kill all the other mercenaries along with Aster, and now the scene was simply the result of that strategy. But Aster had not been defeated. He was already prepared to deliver the final blow and precisely blast Callahan's head. He said that cold-heartedness would be the reason for his death. The magical shot he fired was condensed, direct, and so fast that it pierced Callahan's head like a sniper bullet, leaving a clean hole in his forehead. The body collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Even so, Aster was exhausted. It was to be expected, since fighting someone like Callahan was no easy task. Any other mage would have been eliminated in that ambush. Callahan's final spell, though deadly, ended up being his own undoing. If he had joined forces with the mercenaries, instead of sacrificing them, he might have had a chance. Aster, worn out and with dangerously low mana levels, approached Callahan's body to search through his belongings. He knew what he was looking for. Most battle mages do not trust anyone, so they carry their own grimoires. And there, as expected, he found a bag with subspace. He took it for himself and stored the artifact with ease. At that moment, Perun appeared among the rubble. Aster, still out of breath, said the professor was late. Perun, with his sarcastic tone, replied that he had been busy dealing with some rats. And more importantly, he wanted to know if Aster was one of them too. Tired of the insinuation, Aster said he had just dealt with that lunatic over there and asked if the professor still thought he was the enemy. Perun, now calmer, replied that maybe Aster was Wenji's messenger and wanted to know who the hell the other mercenary with him was. He also asked if the research would now be divided into two parts. Aster, already more relaxed, concluded that the other guy had probably brought a fake version of the thesis. Most likely all of this had been planned by Wenji. He used a decoy to draw in the curious, perhaps as a way to justify increased security in the Academy City while simultaneously controlling the influence of the Decalan family. Even with the concealment barrier, the battle had been too flashy, so Aster found it strange that the Imperial Knights had not shown up yet, unless that too was part of Wenji's plan. In the end, the Decalan family was exposed, and Aster, who was the real messenger, delivered the thesis as agreed. Professor Perun asked if he knew the content of the document, and Aster replied that he did. He said he had no problem fighting, but asked if the professor really wanted to give up a strong ally. Perun affirmed that the papers were safe and acknowledged that Aster had done a good job. That settled the matter. Even so, Perun mentioned that his acquaintance, Andy, was only interested in people with well-defined desires, those with ambitions that aligned with his own goals. That was why he naturally assumed Aster also wanted something in return. And he was right. Aster revealed that he wanted a book. His plan was to build a large and majestic tower, where he would place all the books he could find, allowing anyone to read them. That was why he wanted a book written by Perun, someone with a unique view of arcane sciences. Perun thought the idea of writing a book was amusing, and started to seriously consider it. Then he asked how they could stay in contact. He assumed Aster would return again to deliver another document, but Aster replied with indifference, making it clear he had no interest in forming personal bonds. Still, he handed over a communication crystal made of two connected spheres. If one were broken, the other would also shatter. He explained that if Perun wanted to talk to him, he just had to break one sphere, and if he were in danger, he should break both. That way, there would be no need to go looking for him. But before Perun could reply, Aster had already vanished. Shortly after, the Imperial Knights arrived at the scene, isolated the area, and temporarily evacuated the Academy students to prevent further incidents. Aster, as always, took advantage of the commotion to blend in with the students and disappear from the authorities' sight. Thinking it through, everything pointed to the Decalan family being truly responsible for what had happened. Because of that, they would likely remain quiet for a long time. During the previous battle, Aster had also noticed something strange. The seal on his chest had reacted differently. Normally, it never responded, but when he blocked Karen's magic, Aster felt a power resonating along with the barrier, which ended up helping suppress the counterattack. He still could not fully explain it, but it seemed like a kind of magical rejection, an elemental technique used by mages to prevent the caster from being harmed by their own magic. Even without fully understanding it, he decided to investigate the matter later. As he walked, a boy named Chenbi approached, asking if he was good at fighting, and if he was the same one who had started that fight. Aster wondered if the boy had seen him fighting that night. If he had, maybe Aster would have to silence him. However, Chenbi was just impressed by the fight on the first day, when Aster faced a martial artist, and said that scene had been quite impressive. Aster responded coldly, saying the opponent had just been a weakling. As Aster turned his back to leave, Chenbi said he just wanted to be near him. He confessed that he had not made any friends yet, and found it hard to fit in. Aster understood perfectly. The Academy promised equality for everyone, regardless of origin, but that was a promise made by the institution, not by the students themselves. Even so, he replied that it was fine, and that he did not expect anything bad from Chenbi. The boy sincerely thanked him. Chenbi commented that rumors spread very quickly in that place. A bad reputation could arise overnight. Despite that, Aster was having a peaceful conversation with someone, and that was rare in his life. Until that moment, Aster had only met lunatics or eccentric people wherever he went. He had almost forgotten what it was like to be around someone normal. Now, at last, he was about to begin his true academic life. The next morning, during their first official class, Damien was still feeling sleepy when Chenbi approached to form a trio. He casually remarked that it was surprising how classes were resuming so soon after the chaos of the previous day. In his opinion, they at least deserved a break. Aster, observing everything, thought that based on their earlier conversation, Chenbi probably did not come from a noble family and did not seem to have much money. Even so, he was cheerful, showed no shyness, and seemed like a decent person. Chenbi himself commented that on the way to class, he had found out who their teacher would be. It was Miss Jaira, who was famous for having fought off an entire order of trolls on her own, and won. Shortly after Jaira arrived, Aster recognized her from the entrance ceremony, although he had not known her name until then, since he had not paid much attention at the time. The teacher began the class by explaining that there had been a minor disturbance the previous day, but that it should not be a cause for concern. From that point on, the focus should be on learning. Before beginning the lesson content, Jaira explained that she needed to measure the mana of each student. This measurement would assess both the quantity and the quality of each person's magical energy. She then asked the class what they thought was more important, the quantity or the quality of mana. A student named Argan raised her hand and answered that for those who already had a certain amount of mana, the quality would be more relevant. In a clash between mages of the same level, the quality of mana would determine the winner. Aster silently agreed. That was the answer found in books. Mana quality influenced the precision, stability, and power of spells. Even with a large amount of mana, it would be useless if it could not hit the target properly. Jaira then asked where Arjun was from, and the student replied that she came from the barony of Palan. The teacher commented that it made sense, and Luna, one of the students, looked visibly shaken by that. Soon after, Diana asked if anyone else would like to try answering. Since no one volunteered, the teacher randomly pointed at another student. The chosen one said that maybe mana quantity was more important, because in large-scale battles, those with more mana could cast more spells. Aster considered that perspective valid. In certain situations, both quantity and quality could be essential, depending on the type of combat. Even so, Jaira made a disapproving expression. Then all the other students began offering their own answers, but none seemed to satisfy the teacher. In the end, Jaira said she had listened carefully to all of them. She said those answers were close to the truth, but none were truly correct. While she spoke, one student was still quietly crying. The teacher asked everyone to reflect on what they had said. She wanted to know if they had answered based on something they truly believed, or if they had only said what they thought she wanted to hear. According to Jaira, a mage must never lose their own conviction. Regardless of the place or situation, one should not act based on others' opinions. A true mage needs willpower and resolve until the end. To her, that was the mindset of a mage. From that moment on, everyone there would begin the path to becoming true mages. That was the message she wanted to pass on to each of them. Aster thought that her approach was excellent. In the end, he had been right about her. The teacher had an eccentric style, maybe even a little crazy, but she used it to teach deep and important lessons. Right after, Jaira announced that Argan would be the representative of Class M3 from the Magic Division. Her answer had been the most impressive, and because of that, she would be responsible for recording the mana levels of the other students. Argan was very excited and happily stepped down to fulfill her new role. Aster watched everything carefully and concluded that this was exactly how people were trained. That teacher was, without a doubt, cruel, but extremely effective. Chenbi commented that he was really jealous of everything going on. Soon after, the assistant teacher approached with the device used to measure the students' mana. Professor Jaira explained that most of them probably had never seen such an instrument. She said it was time to find out the mana level of each of them. Maybe there was a genius among the students. Maybe even a true monster was hiding in their midst. Everyone was impressed when they saw that Jaira herself had a mana level of 9/67. After that, the assistant teacher explained that the device was quite simple simple to use and asked Miss Arjen to give a demonstration. All she had to do was touch the sphere and focus her magical energy. As soon as Arjen touched the artifact, magical gears activated inside the sphere, revealing that her mana quality was at level 4. Jera explained that the central number represented the quality of mana, which could range from 1 to 10. Arjen's level 4, considering she was just a freshman, was quite impressive. The previous year, the average had been only 3. Arjen was extremely excited with the result. Next, Jera announced that she would also measure Arjen's mana quantity. The process was the same. Mana quantity could go up to level 100. Arjen reached 17, which was above the average of 15, so she was above expectations in that area as well. The teacher congratulated her, saying she seemed to be an excellent mage. Chenbi, watching everything with excitement, commented that he hoped to get a high result too. Aster, on the other hand, thought the teacher was training Arjen in an exemplary way. She already seemed to be becoming a dedicated follower of that strict teaching style. After that, Jera passed the responsibility for the next test to the class representative and the assistant teacher, as she needed to take care of other matters. Chenbi was visibly excited to test his own mana, while Aster waited calmly and Damien was still dozing off. Then the class's attention turned to a student who had obtained a surprising result. Her mana was recorded as 6/20, meaning 6 in quality and 20 in quantity. It was Frieren of Denai, Dahlia's sister. Aster noticed that her hair was slightly different and concluded she probably came from a collateral bloodline. The assistant teacher commented that, as expected from a noble descendant, her results were excellent. Although her mana quantity was slightly lower than her quality, that was not a weakness. With enough training, it could easily be compensated. The commotion woke Damien, who, still sleepy, asked what was going on. Aster explained that they were measuring the student's mana and suggested that he take the test too. Damien, suddenly excited, said he really wanted to participate. He could barely speak from so much excitement, repeating several times that he wanted to be measured. Aster, confused, wondered why that boy acted like that. As the three of them approached the sphere, many students were amazed. Everyone knew Damien, heir of the Blandor family, and they were also talking about Aster, known for having beaten up an entire group of students. As for Chenbi, nobody knew who he was. Aster thought to himself that it was not exactly a proud achievement to be known for beating up another kid, but in any case, Damien was the first to try. When he channeled his mana into the device, the result shocked everyone. The number revealed was exactly the same as Professor Jera's, 9/67. The assistant teacher was so surprised he thought the device must be malfunctioning. Aster believed that was the usual reaction when people faced a true genius. It was like an unscalable wall rising before their eyes, something impossible to surpass or even comprehend. Damien, curious, asked if that number was considered high. Aster already knew from the beginning that Damien was a genius. Now he understood even better why the so-called monster of Blandor was so powerful. Damien had simply been born that way. In his past life, if Damien had truly dedicated himself, he could have changed the fate of the entire continent. But this time, things would be different. Blandor would become a colossal obstacle to the Deculan and would lead Damien to surpass all common limits. The assistant teacher acknowledged that Damien was truly worthy of the name he carried. It was an impressive result, but he warned him not to be consumed by ambition. Damien simply replied with a fine. After the mana test began, someone asked if Aster had already done his. If not, he would be next. Aster realized that everyone was curious about his mana level, especially because they wanted to compare it to Damien's. To avoid drawing too much attention, he decided to adjust his energy and hide a bit of his true power. He did not want to stand out too much, but when he touched the device, he realized too late that the limiter was set too low. The amount of mana released was far beyond what he expected. The number shot past 10 and continued climbing beyond 40. The device kept escalating the level without stopping until it eventually crashed with an error for exceeding the supported limit. Damien thought it was amazing. Aster, on the other hand, realized this was bad. The device had simply stopped working. The professor suggested getting another device to redo the test, but Damien insisted it was accurate, that the result was real. Internally, all Aster could think was how badly he wanted him to shut up. The professor restarted the device and asked Aster to try again. This time, Aster controlled his mana more carefully. The new result was modest, 3/15, a standard, discrete number. But Damien, still suspicious, commented that it was nonsense. A very bad word. Aster, surprised, wondered since when Damien used that kind of language. Damien explained that a friend had taught him. He said that when something seemed like a big lie, people usually used that expression. Aster grew concerned. He realized he would now have to be more careful about what he said around the boy. He could not just say anything anymore. Meanwhile, in the first department of magic, Professor Jira was noting that the renovation of the second department was going well. She was reflecting on the recent incidents involving Deculan, the mage named Callahan, and also Parun, who was once a famous name in the past. She believed she could handle the situation, although she did not consider it her direct responsibility. That was when the assistant teacher arrived, bringing the mana test results. As she had suspected, most students had average results. The only one who exceeded the normal limits was Damien, which came as no surprise. After all, he came from a noble family and had natural talent. But what truly caught her attention was Aster's result. His first reading had triggered a code for exceeding the limit. That alone was enough to spark the professor's interest. She decided that from now on, she would observe that boy more closely. Back in class, Aster was already scolding Damien for repeating bad words. He said it was not a nice thing to say, and he added that the expression was his in the first place.